All right, today my guest is Claire Schindler. She's an airline transport pilot on a Boeing 747, pilot in command, type rated on Falcon 7X and Global XRS 5000, where she instructs part-time. She's been featured in Forbes magazine for International Women's Day 2023. She's also flown for formation as a formation pilot in multiple aircraft for air-to-air filming and a Netflix movie, Mercury 13. Claire, thank you for being my guest today here in Fort Worth. We're actually at Axiom Coffee, found a good place to have some space, and I found this awesome backdrop. I thought it was perfect. World map. I'm sure you've traveled a ton flying.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of get started with the Netflix movie. So Mercury 13, can you talk about maybe the movie, but also being the formation pilot and a little bit of that?
Yeah, so my first flying job out of college was with Chalk 2. It's still in existence, and it's chasing UAVs. So I'll be in a chase plane like Cessna 210, and I fall behind in formation behind the UAV. So while I was in that job in Southern California, I saw a Facebook posting on our Female Aviators Sticking Together page, and it was, does anyone live in Southern California that flies formation that would be interested in doing a film? They didn't say it was for Netflix, they just said a film. And I was like, I do that. And so I answered, I was like, yeah, if I have some weekends off, I could help you out. And then I got a phone call from the director, and they said, well, how old are you? And I was like, well, I'm 23, but I was like, I mean, I have, 500 hours, and I do this for my job. And they're like, oh, no, that's good. Like, we keep getting older pilots, and we're trying to portray these women as they were in their 20s. So, like, that works perfectly. They're like, we just need you to wear a couple wigs. And they listed off some of the airplanes, and I was like, okay, I've flown most of those. I can do that. And so it was cool, but it was different because it was flying in formation with a helicopter and not a UAV. But
right.
It was a really cool experience.
Cool. And so what inspired you to become a pilot?
I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my dad worked a lot, but on the weekends we'd go to the mall, and we'd go to the Smithsonian's, and he was Air Force, so we always went to the Air and Space Museum, and that's where I found Amelia Earhart, and she's still my idol to this day. I just liked that she traveled the world all on her own, under her own power, and she was the first female pilot I ever saw, so that was what inspired me.
Wow. How was the Smithsonian?
Oh, so cool. It's only getting better. They're just adding more stuff. I think I like the Udvar Hazy better, actually.
Oh, yeah?
For airplanes. If you want to do space, then definitely go downtown.
So I mentioned that you fly the Boeing 747, the Falcon 7X, Global XRS. Can you talk about the differences? Because I'm sure it's kind of like cars, like different cars, it's a different feel. And just for somebody that doesn't fly, can you explain kind of the differences between those?
Yeah, so the Falcon 7X and the Global XRS are both corporate aircraft, so they're business jets. So they're more like sports cars.
Nice, they're fast.
Yes, they're fast, they're sleek, they're pretty to look at. The Falcon 7X is fairly new. It's a 2008 is when it was manufactured. So it's fly-by-wire. Like it's very high-end technology. It's very automated. The Global XRS is like a 90s model. It's very, very powerful though and sleek. They each hold about, you could fit comfortably, you could fit 10 people on there, but more than that, I'm flying 4 people at a time. But it's, mostly business executives, the rich, the famous, that kind of stuff. And then I jumped into the 747, which is 4 times the size of those, purely for cargo operations. It sits 50 feet higher than my last airplane looking out. So it's a completely different sight picture. And it's older, but she still works beautifully.
Right, so it'd be like, you mentioned it's kind of like the Falcon 7X is like a sports car. So it'd be like getting from a sports car to this lifted truck, right? You're like, oh wow, it's so much higher up here. And so when you talk about fly-by-wire, just so people understand that maybe don't have any experience in aviation, so 747, it's got pulleys and all that old stuff. And then Falcon 7X, it's pretty much all electronic. So there's no pulleys or anything that are moving the flight surfaces and all that, right?
Yeah, so the computer is like whatever you input on the controls, it sends a signal to a computer, it sends it to like a calculated computer, and then it sends it to the control inputs to actually move it. So in a way, it's easier to fly. You don't have to give much thought into how much input you're doing so much. But 7.4, you got to give a lot of input thought to it because like you're making all those calculations of how much like you're inputting.
And I'm sure, can you feel that difference then? Because one's being controlled by a computer, one's being, or servos, and
Yes.
one's all just pulleys, so it's a completely different feel. Would it be like maybe an old hot rod where you feel everything on the road, where a newer car, it's very smooth? And
That's exactly what it is, especially because the Falcon 7X was my first jet, and I'd never flown fly-by-wire before, so landing was really hard for me because it's all auto-trimmed, it's all automated. There's no artificial feelback to the controls, so it's really hard to get a feel for it, and I was over-controlling it the whole way. It's very easy to do with fly-by-wire.
so could you talk about like a memorable flight experience that you had?
Honestly, it was flying with my parents. I took one up at a time, but my very first passenger was my mom, and I think she used to worry so much. Like, she used to make me call her before and after I landed. And now she never knows where I am, but we've grown
That's
so
a big
much.
change.
Yeah, but I think it was just after like the year and a half it took me to get my license, and you know, she drove me to most of those lessons because I was earning my driver's license while I was taking those flying lessons, that I think it was just nice for her to see it pay all off and experience it, and yeah, that was a cool moment.
So when you first started flying, I think at some point, and I didn't really talk about this, but you have to do like a solo flight. How was that? Was it pretty nerve-wracking?
Yeah, I think my instructor told my parents, but not me, that he was going to solo me that day. Because my
wow.
parents showed up at the airport, which is almost an hour away from our house, to be there for it. And yeah, he just got out of the plane, and you do 3 full stop landings. And yeah, it was very nerve-wracking, and it turns out that the tower is a training tower. So they cleared me to land in front of a Falcon jet. And then in the middle of me turning like base to final towards the runway, they said do a 360. And so I did a 270 is the correct call, back into the downwind, let the jet land first. And yeah, but my parents and my instructor all watched that from the ground. That was my first solo.
So for somebody that, you know, maybe they want to learn to fly, they're scared, what kind of advice do you have? Because, you know, I've talked to some people and they're like, I don't know. I don't know if I could be a pilot because there's so many controls and I wouldn't know. And I'm like, well, I'm sure you're going to learn all of that. But what advice would you have for somebody that wants to start flying, but they're unsure, scared?
The aviation community is very welcoming and opening, and I think that's probably the best part about it is everyone's so happy to help and talk about it. So that's one big aspect of it is I highly recommend getting like a mentor, especially if you have an idea of what field of aviation you would like to go into. And then I'm not very good at math, and I don't think you really have to be smart to do this job because it is just training. It's just learning what to do in different situations, and you do break it down piece by piece by piece. I think it's important not to compare your progress to someone else's.
Right.
It's very easy to do in this industry, but it does you no favors because everyone learns at different paces. Someone will always be slower than you, someone will always be faster than you, but you're all doing the same thing.
Sure.
So I think it's just finding a mentor, I think, to talk about how you want to get there, and they can show you the steps to get there and, you know, help you with your progress is probably a big aspect of it.
In that process, I'm sure you are put into situations where if there's, you know, an engine that goes out or, you know, something happens, I'm sure you practice that with your instructors so that way, because it's not a car where you can just pull it to the side of the road, right? So, but somebody that wants to learn how to fly, they're going to think, well, what if something goes wrong? Well, I'm sure you practice that multiple times and put yourself in those situations so it becomes second nature. Like, I know exactly what controls what I have to do, right?
So part of it is like just knowing the systems of your airplane. So I know that if this breaks, I'm going to lose X, Y, and Z. And then, yeah, as a private pilot student, I mean, your instructor will pull your engine, will pull the power to idle. They're not actually killing your engine, but they'll just pull the power to idle and simulate an engine failure. They'll do it so many times that you'll get annoyed that when it happens. And because all it is like you have a single engine, so like that's your only engine. You just get used to looking for fields, looking for places to land. That's just, it becomes natural over time and becomes a non-event.
What are some of the biggest challenges that maybe you had when you were becoming a pilot or going through instruction?
There's many. Part of it was money. I mean, it's very, very expensive to get started. I highly recommend scholarships and reaching out to organizations that help with things like that. Some of it is relationships and work-life balance. As a pilot, I am gone for 2 weeks at a time. And then obviously, probably the biggest one is just there's still sexism in the industry. It is a 95% male-dominated industry. So even just in relationships where I work with guys all the time, some relationships, some guys couldn't handle that I would, work and hang out with guys.
Right.
And then I've even had management not tell me I'm fit to be captain because, quote, we have passenger perspectives to consider. And things like that.
So is that like a perception thing? Like when they see a female pilot, but they're, I don't know if she can. And I did see a video once, and it was actually a female that was giving the speech, and she said she got on the plane, and she turned and looked and saw a female pilot, and even herself, she doubted that she was capable. Well, what if something goes wrong? And it was like, I don't know, confirmation bias or something that she realized, like, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But what I want to talk about a little bit more is, I have 2 young daughters, and for anybody out there that has young daughters, what would you tell them as a female, right? Like about whether it be becoming a pilot or any career that may be male dominated historically, what advice would you have for them?
I think you have to find the joy in it, because if it's something that you really love to do, you just don't care what other people think. I find a lot of joy in leaving the earth and traveling to new places.
I like that phrase, because you're literally like leaving it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get to forget about the world for a minute, because I flew with Patty Wagstaff. I did her aerobatic course, and she kept saying, the airplane doesn't know your gender. Airplane doesn't know. The airplane doesn't care.
Right.
It just wants you to
fly.
I like
that. Yeah.
And she's right. I think it's funny because like women are planners and very fine motor skills and like attention to detail, all things that you need to be a good pilot. So I think if you find the joy in it, you stop caring what other people think. And I finally, got to a point in my career where like, when I was starting out on the 7X, it's an abnormal jet to be given as your first jet. I got very, very lucky. I'm an exception to the rule. But I had people imply that like I got my job because of my gender, because I did something, because, they had very negative implications about it.
Right.
But I finally got to the point where I was like, I have over 3,000 hours total time. I have over 1,500 in this plane alone. I now instruct on it. Like, I am a professional in my field.
Right, and for somebody that maybe is not in, they're not familiar with aviation and flight hours, what is maybe like the average, or just trying to think of the way to say it? I mean, because you could say, 1,500, 3,000. How do you, I guess, put that in perspective or relative to understand, like, that's a lot of hours?
Like a commercial license, just a commercial license would be, it's required that you have 250 hours. And then for an airline transport certificate, you need 1,500 hours. So I'm at over double the requirement for 1,500.
Okay. Teamwork and communication. I'm sure that's a huge one, right? I mean, anybody could understand, if you fly into DFW, you see hundreds of planes and operations and things going on. Can you talk a little bit about teamwork and communication within aviation and being a pilot?
Yeah, so we have the term crew resource management, which has been molded over the years, but it started in the 70s, and it's just basically an entire course of teamwork and communication within the cockpit, or I shouldn't even just say in the cockpit, because if you have flight attendants, you want to include them in that conversation as well. But yeah, it's basically figuring out correct ways to communicate with your crew to problem solve whatever is happening. And it's especially important in aviation because I can think of an example. I had a captain that didn't like me, and I can't pinpoint if it was an age thing, if it was a gender thing, if it was a culture thing, a combination of the three. He didn't like me. And we were approaching a thunderstorm, but only 40 minutes into a flight. So we were quite heavy with fuel, so we couldn't climb. And I said this to him twice, and he ignored me. And he climbed anyway. And basically we were so heavy that we couldn't climb anymore. So we couldn't out-climb the thunderstorm, and we nearly stalled the airplane. So we nearly, I don't know how to describe it.
Wow. Not good.
Yeah, it's not good. We got into a precarious situation. Actually, the term for it is coffin corner.
It doesn't sound good.
No, it's not. It's the limitations of the airplane as far as airspeed and all that. But yeah, it was awful. We went through some extreme turbulence going through the thunderstorm. And then, after the fact, he just said, I don't know what happened. And he didn't debrief it. He didn't explain himself. He didn't, apologize. There was nothing. So I didn't really know what to do. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll file a safety report. And so I filed a safety report, and, they do a whole investigation, and I'd get a conference call with the chief pilot and the training manager and the safety guy, and they're like, well, you could have taken the controls. And I was like, taking the controls in some violent fashion is very movies. I mean, I'm not actually going to do that. And fighting for it might cause even more issues. And not to mention, I had 9 more hours of flying with this guy just on that trip. So I was like, we try and teach it in class. We try and teach ways to confront people in a constructive way, but it's hard, and I think it's important, especially as a captain, to leave a open door policy kind of action, because otherwise people will be too scared to speak up when you make a mistake, or if they need to add something or point something out to you. If you bite their head off, they're not going to say anything. So
yeah, that's unfortunate, because I'm sure you go to the flight data recorder. Okay, what was she saying? What was he saying? What altitude were we at? What were the conditions? Instead of pinpointing you and saying, well, you could have done this. Well, I did make a statement several times, right? And it's to me, that's unfortunate, because just look at the facts. Nothing else, the facts. And then you can reprimand him or whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
Because fortunately, in that case, nothing happened, right? But how many times can you do that? And it only takes one time.
It really does.
And you're putting somebody's life on the line, right? To just, I don't know, not listen and not do the correct thing.
Well, that's why the cargo world is so different for me, because normally it's just the 2 guys, me and another guy up front and our flight attendant in the back, and that's it. But with the cargo world, I mean, we have no flight attendant, which is kind of a bummer. But there's usually 4 of us, and we split all of our duties. And then we just come back and we have a game plan. But I kind of like that it's divided, because everyone has their own job. No one's really micromanaging or anything. We just kind of trust each other to do our roles, and then we come back and have a little powwow about it and go do it. And it's there's no egos. There's
that's
no
the teamwork aspect. Everybody's got their role and responsibility, and like you said, then they come back together, and you're all working towards the same goal. What are the different, can you talk about different career paths available for pilots? Somebody's like, I want to be a pilot, but I'm thinking, you kind of mentioned it earlier, there's several different paths you can take as a pilot.
Yeah, so many. So there's airlines. There's, United, Delta, American. You can fly for any of the airlines, passenger airlines. There's corporate, which is what I did. So that could be flying like an individual that owns a plane, or it could be flying for a charter company. So think of it as like an Uber for the uber rich. And then there's cargo, which is what I do now. So you're just flying around boxes. So if like people really aren't your thing, maybe you want to do cargo. And then there's like some really niche ones, like government flying jobs, like search and rescue, wildland firing, medevac, things like that. So there's many opportunities for flying.
What do you enjoy most about being a pilot? Or maybe just a couple things. What are the, rewarding parts of being a pilot?
I think it's the experience of like traveling, but also the problem solving. I really like challenges and problem solving, and that's a lot of what flying is like how to get from A to B, but then there's all these steps in between and all these obstacles in between you have to figure out. I think it's a lot of fun, and going to different places is a lot of fun.
Right, so you have like different waypoints along the way and around weather or different...
Something breaks on the airplane, we gotta adapt to it. I can't go into the airspace, I gotta go around it. Okay, well then how does that affect my fuel? Okay, well then how does that affect my landing weight? And things like that.
I'm sure you've traveled, I think you said you traveled all over like Asia. What would be one of the, I don't want to say your favorite place, but an interesting place that you like to visit?
I'm going to say Cambodia.
Cambodia?
So Siem Reap. So it's like not quite as touristy because it's not the capital, but they have all the temples there. So it's beautiful culture, beautiful countryside. It's very cheap. The food is amazing.
That's what I was going to ask you. You got to always talk about the food.
Oh my God, it's amazing. I did like a 9-hour bike tour to see 3 temples, and we stopped for like fruit and water on the side of the road, and then we stopped at like literally like a tent with some benches, and there were some older ladies in the back cooking, and it was like stir-fried noodles and stuff. We served it up family style. It was great.
You're making me hungry now.
I know, it was good.
Is there a certain dish in Cambodia that you would recommend, or is it all good?
I don't even know the names of them every time.
That right there.
Yeah, it was just like
when you're there.
I ate it and it was really good.
And the fruit, was it? I'm sure it was like pretty fresh and just
like
amazing.
Asian pears, fresh watermelon. It was so good.
How do you see the future of aviation evolving?
I think I'm a little scared, but I'm very interested because I think we've hit a point where it's gotten really safe. We almost never have aviation accidents, and when we do, it's like over 80% are pilot-induced now. So I see automation playing a bigger role. I just don't know what that really looks like because I'm not sure how comfortable the public is with that. I'm also interested in like the efficiency. I think we might see some supersonic coming through, especially because I think our technology has finally caught up with fuel and noise, and to make it more efficient than what we were doing with like the Concorde and stuff like that. So I think we'll see much faster and efficient stuff as well.
Do you see AI kind of coming in there at some time?
I could see it. Like I'm certain that cargo will probably get taken over fairly easily because there's no people on there. But yeah, I think we might see more the pilots step into more of like a monitoring role than anything else to start with first.
But I would suspect that you would still have to go through the training and stuff, because there is going to be a time that something's going to malfunction and you have to take the controls, or you have to solve a problem, right? When a computer or something fails.
Exactly, yeah, we'll have to be there.
Do you have any last words of wisdom for somebody pursuing a career as a pilot, or anything else that you'd like to share that you really find important?
I think it's important to find a community or a team that backs you up in what you want to do. That was really easy for me just because my dad was Air Force, so I had all these, places picked out. But I think finding people that support you in a strong base, because this is a really emotionally and financially demanding career to get started in. So I think finding a good support base is important, and then finding what you want to do is very important, because I think you get lost in the work, then you don't appreciate the end goal as much anymore unless you find the joy in it.
Right. Do you have any website, social media links, or anything that you like to share?
Like
Organizations, or just LinkedIn account of yours to connect with others, anything like that?
So I have my own LinkedIn, Claire Schindler, Fort Worth based. I'm on Instagram as well and Facebook. I personally like Women in Aviation. They do scholarships for men and women. And then I'm also part of the Commemorative Air Force. We do like the older airplanes.
Right.
We fix them up and keep them flying and do all the air shows. Those are some of my favorite ones.
Do you have a specific, like a favorite old aircraft?
I mean, I'm not very original, but I'm going to say the P-51. I know it's not original, but I like that.
P-51 Mustang.
Yeah. It's nice. Now, my dad's is the Corsair, so.
Okay. Well, Claire, I appreciate it. Thank you for meeting, taking the time, sharing your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.